Another day, another review, and another horror movie. There's so many of these, I'm kind of wondering how long until people start complaining about horror movie fatigue. I think it'll be a while, because horror seems like the best place to do original new things. Yet even by horror movie standards, teenage sex and death at Camp Miasma is unlike nothing you've seen before. On the surface, it's about a young director played by Hannah Ironbinder who's hired to direct a sequel to a cult horror movie, and the relationship she forms with the actress who played the final girl in the original film and who here is played by Gillian Anderson. On the surface, I suppose it's not a terribly original premise, but when you see it in action, it really feels unlike anything else you'll see this year. Now, this movie is directed by Jane Schoenbrun, who directed I Saw the TV Glow, and if you watched that, you would know they have a very distinct dreamlike aesthetic. And while I appreciated the style of that movie, I just felt like it narratively went off the rails and lacked anything resembling a traditional, understandable narrative. Now, Camp Miasma in a lot of ways has that same effect. This is far from a traditional 3-act narrative structure film, and oftentimes it feels like you're just living with the characters and soaking in the atmosphere than experiencing a traditional story. Like, there is a 10-minute or so segment in this movie where you're essentially watching a movie within a movie. And while I found that off-putting in I Saw the TV Glow, here there's just the right balance of atmosphere and experimentation and traditional storytelling. Like I Saw the TV Glow, this is a very love it or hate it movie, and for me, I absolutely loved it. I know Jane Schoenbrun has mentioned David Lynch as an influence on their work, and I genuinely think they're the closest director we have to David Lynch right now. The way this movie creates atmosphere is truly something to behold. Everything from the surreal visuals to the sound design gives you the feeling that you're not watching a movie, you're living inside a dream. The sets are just real enough to be grounded, but just surreal enough to feel like something you could have dreamed up in your head. The sets are just realistic enough to feel lived in, but then they'll blend them in with a surrealist background that blurs the line between real and painting, just as the movie walks back and forth between dream and nightmare. A lesser director would have thought, since we want to go dreamy, we have to go completely off the rails. But director Jane Schoenbrun really understands the language of a dream. The fact that they tend to be just real enough to have us fooled, but that feeling that there's something off. And this movie hits that right on the nose. I mentioned earlier that there's a 10-minute stretch here where we're watching a movie within a movie, and not only is that incredibly experimental and fresh, I also loved how that part of the movie genuinely tied back to the themes and the characters. And when we segue into the movie within a movie and then back to the actual narrative of the film, the connective tissue is just threaded beautifully. Now, it'll be impossible to discuss this movie without lavishing it with praise for the two incredible performances at the center. For as absurd as this movie gets, it only works because it's grounded in the emotional truth of Ironbinder's performance. And as for Anderson, I don't go into a movie like this expecting to see a movie star performance, but what do you know, this one absolutely has it. I mean, she is absolutely magnetic and jaw-dropping every time she's on the screen. Now, I praise this movie for feeling like a dream, but just like any dream, this really doesn't make a lot of sense. And my least favorite thing about this movie is that it traffics in a lot of great themes. Art vs. commerce, what horror movies can mean to us, self-expression, identity, self-discovery. There's so many, but it doesn't tie them into anything cohesive. It really feels like a hodgepodge of themes, touching on one before moving to the other and then maybe coming back to the first theme. It's a bit of a thematic mess. It's disappointing because if you take, say, two ideas from this movie and any of them could be a cinematic anchor. But because there's so many, all of them are left a little bit underexplored. But for better or worse, it really does feed into the cinematic language of the film. Teenage sex and death in Camp Miasma is unlike anything you'll see all year, and it is far bigger than a movie. Watching this doesn't feel like experiencing a film, it feels like living in a dream. What a beautiful thing for a film to accomplish. And for that, I'm giving this one an 8.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for weekly TV and movie reviews. And if you've had the chance to watch Camp Miasma, let us know what you thought about it. I'm Cinemike, and I'll see you next time.